Welcome to From Loneliness to Overflow with Matina. I'm your host, a holistic healing coach, divorce recovery coach, and a passionate advocate for personal growth and your guide on the journey to healing. This podcast is for those who are struggling with the feelings of loneliness, disconnection, feeling stuck, and who are ready to discover their inner potential and live a life overflowing with love and connection. Inside, we're going to explore the path from pain to transformation, bridging the gap between loneliness and abundance through heartfelt conversation, spirituality, energy work, and self-awareness. So let's get started on this soulful journey together. Today we have this beautiful soul, Allison Marie, joining us in exploring her healing journey and her growth and how she bridged the gap from loneliness to living an abundant life. And this conversation is really for everyone who has not only felt the loss of their family member and maybe even friends, but really also the loss of themselves. Who are you? Who are you in your own soul? And who do you choose to be every single day? So I'm excited for this conversation today, Allison. And please introduce yourself.
Well, hi. Thank you for having me. First off, I want to give a shout out to you, Matina, for knowing the importance of this. This subject matter actually resonates with the Surgeon General. Last year, the Surgeon General gave a warning about loneliness and about where our country is going as a result of that. So kudos to you for having that foresight and that wisdom to know that this is an important subject for everybody.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. My name's Allison Marie. And today I am a very happy, successful, and prosperous person in a number of different ways. But it certainly didn't start off there. I know we've all been lonely and we've all experienced different things. At an early age, I'm the youngest of three girls. My mother was divorced from my father. And there were many times that I, as a young girl, was left alone. I'm talking about I'm not even double digits. I'm talking about 6, 7, 8 years old because my sisters were doing other activities. My mother didn't have anybody to care for me, so I was actually alone. So at an early age, at those tender ages, I didn't like being alone, and I created imaginary friends, and I used to talk to myself. To this very day, I still do because it helps me process stuff.
Oh, wow. This is so beautiful, Allison, because loneliness is two ways, right? Loneliness could be in the sense of I'm alone in my home. I'm alone. I have no people around me. But loneliness is also a feeling. So what you're describing right now is the feeling of physical loneliness, having no one around you at a very young age of 6. And then really coping with it in a way of creating your own community, even if it's imaginary friends, because that's all we know as a 6-year-old. Truly, to have that knowledge in you, to step into creating that so that you can feel safe, really. So how did you deal with that?
Well, I think the knowledge is universal. I think there's just innate knowledge, and we are either receiving it or we're blocking it out. And I was able to receive it, and I was able to use those skills. And so I wasn't lonely because I would talk out loud to myself, and I was fine. I've healed myself plenty by doing that, dealing with situations. You can process a lot by talking to yourself, or at least I can anyway. So as my youth went on, my mother divorced my father. I was living with my mother and her second husband, my stepfather. And it was a very volatile, very violent relationship. I used to see my mother get beat up. They would fight a lot. It would not be unusual for me to have come home and curtains were ripped off the walls, furniture was broken, and my mother was quitting her job because she had a black eye and now she's wearing sunglasses. So that's what I saw. And when we see things over and over again, we think that is normal. It's a normal pattern. So I started off with having abandonment issues because my father didn't have anything to do with us. Mm-hmm. He was absent completely, never paid child support, never had a relationship with us. Mm-hmm. And I always, like everybody else that I went to school with, I always longed for that. And my stepfather was not a really happy-go-lucky person, and he wasn't really happy to have 3 stepchildren that he just didn't really want to participate with.
Right.
After years of watching him do this to my environment and my family, I told him off. I just told him, I said, I don't know what kind of man you think you are to like pin my mother down and beat her up, but you're not much of a man. You're not. As a result of that, I got kicked out of the house when I was 16 years old and I was on my own.
There's so much that you're sharing right now, Allison, and it just breaks my heart to thinking. Okay, so you talked earlier about a 6-year-old who was left home alone because there were no other options. And to being a 16-year-old who stands up against her stepfather, shows that courage in telling him that he's not man enough because he's hitting a woman, and then being told to leave the house. Wow. How did you deal with that? What happened once you left that home?
Well, here was what I was told. I was told the next day after that, I was in high school and I had a part-time job. I was on a work permit program. I was working part-time at a bank. Okay. When I got home from work, I had already gone to school, got home from work. And by the way, I had a job, so I was paying to live at that house. I was paying $40 a week to live there to cover me being able to do laundry, food. So I was paying to live there, and $40 when I was 16 was a lot of money, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So anyway, my mother was there, my stepfather was there, and they confronted me with it. And I wasn't going to back down on what I said. And my mother wanted me to apologize to my stepfather, Jim. And I was going to, but he chimed in and he goes, I don't want your apology unless you're going to mean it. And I said, fine, you won't get one. Because I would have done it because I respected my mother, but I wasn't going to lie. I wasn't going to sit there and just lie and say I wasn't. So I was told I had 24 hours to get my clothes and to leave. And so when I came back the next day, and it was less than 24 hours, the locks had already been changed. So I had to make an appointment to get my clothes.
Wow.
Now, I was staying with a friend of mine whose mother was very open-minded that I was going to school with, and they let me sleep on the sofa. And then my grandmother brought money forward for my sister and myself to get a little cottage in downtown St. Petersburg where we lived. And we used to actually share a bedroom. And so that was our first place. And I wound up dropping out of school to work full time so I could earn money because I couldn't work on part time. Yeah. I didn't even have a car. So I was still taking a bus to get around and do stuff. Yeah. And then I started finding myself in relationships that my mother had with the violence, with abuse. And so I thought that was normal. So I was attracting men that would do the same to me. And as a result of that, one day I was tied down and I was beaten up. And quite honestly, that day I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to die that day. And I remember, and I'm face down on a bed. I was actually undressed and completely tied down and I was getting beat up. And I remember started praying. I said, please, dear God, I do not want to die. Not here, not today, not like this. Please help me. And my hand became untied. And I grabbed on the nightstand. I had accidentally left out a can of spray starch and I grabbed it and I threw it out a window and I broke it. And I started screaming fire. I remembered I had seen the Oprah Winfrey show and she goes, neighbors do not want to get involved with domestic violence. And I was living in an apartment. The neighbors had to have heard me screaming, but no one was coming to my rescue. So I started screaming fire and then the police came and that saved me. Otherwise, I don't know that I would be here today. I seriously thought I was going to die that day.
So much of inner wounds in us, especially when we grow up in an environment that is unhealthy, very toxic. It allows you to not only believe that this is the normal, but also to unknowingly recreate that life because there are so many wounds in you that need to figure out and find healing. So how did you go from that experience, that near-to-death experience, to saying something needs to change? Before we continue, I would like to offer you something special. If you desire to deeper and more meaningful connections in your life, and you're looking to improve your relationships with yourself and others, it's time to make a change. I'm inviting you to join our Deepening Connections Through Meditation group. Imagine improving your relationships through meditations that foster understanding and growth. Check out matinasing.com/meditation for more details and use the code GROWTH for an exclusive discount. Now let's get back to our soulful conversation, helping you on your journey of self-awareness and connection.
Well, what it made me do, when you almost lose your life and you're so embarrassed to call your job and you have to say, I can't come into work. And I told them the truth. I said, I was attacked and I was beaten up. And I said, I have bruises all over my body. I can't come to work looking this way. I said, I can give you a police report. And it makes you just take a pause and say, okay, what are my actions? How am I responsible for this? Because guess what? There was something that I was doing to attract this, whether it was unconsciously or not. I still knew there was something that I had to deal with. And I reached out and found a lady. She was a First Unity minister, and she specialized in NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and spent 3 years working with her. And that was the beginning for me, and did a lot of inner child work, reframed a lot of stuff. Yeah. I thought I was responsible for my parents' divorce because I was the youngest of 3 children, and I had proof. My proof was there's pictures of my 2 older sisters and they're posed and what have you. And there were no pictures professionally of me.
Do you see how interesting it is how a story of a child can create this whole narrative, and we can hold on to it and create our own belief systems that then limit us in our lives?
So anyway, after spending 3 years with Nancy doing NLP and doing a lot of healing, because we talked about my father, because that was a major issue around men in general and what have you. And I hadn't seen my father. The last time I had seen my father, I was 3 years old. I was 26 years old. One Sunday he calls and he wanted to meet us. And so we orchestrated it and we met him, and I really liked him, and it was hard. It was difficult. And for a couple of years we had a relationship that was challenged, but it was, better than nothing. Mm-hmm. But then he couldn't handle it and he abandoned us again, which was pretty devastating. At that point, and this is interesting, I've never been married, and I have a banking and accounting background. I was working at a winery in Oregon, and I was the business manager. I handled the receivables, payables, oversaw the internal controls and what have you. Well, this one day in particular, I'm paying a lot of bills and I'm printing off checks from QuickBooks, and I'm an authorized signer. And I was signing my name, and I could tell when I was signing my last name, that was my father's name, I was angry, and you could see it. And you don't need letters in back of your name to easily identify that. And I was like, huh. And that evening, interestingly enough, I was having dinner with a friend of mine, and she was an attorney. And she suggested that I change my name. And I said, I was already thinking about that. And she goes, I'll do it for you. She goes, and I won't charge you. You can just pay whatever. There's a charge to hang it in the courthouse, but I won't charge you for my time. And I said, okay. I already knew what I wanted. My birth name was Allison Marie Clouch, and I dropped my last name and I became Allison Marie.
Beautiful.
So I legally changed my name because I didn't want to, and I've forgiven my father. I've forgiven everybody, but I needed to at that time because when I hadn't processed it enough, and I could see it in my writing.
Also, this is important to hear your point of view in as to why is forgiveness important? Why was forgiving your father, your stepfather, your mother, all of them important to you?
Oh, if you don't forgive people, you're going to be angry forever. And I don't want to be angry. I want to be happy. You can stay in the past, you can stay in the pain, or you can process it and you can move forward. I'm not here to feel sorry for myself, and I'm not going to be a victim either. Not permanently. I mean, there were things that I was exposed to that I had no control over. Well, there's a point in time when you get control and you either take those steps or you can not. And those are choices. So you choose to be healthy, or you can choose to be unhealthy and be angry.
So you chose to be healthy by letting go the anger component and forgiving them consciously.
Absolutely. Forgiveness is super important. And you know what? It's also important because we're so quick to forgive other people, but I had to forgive myself.
Yeah.
I had to forgive myself and know that I was doing the best I could, just like my mother was, just like everybody else was. They were just doing the best they could. Just like Oprah, and I'm quoting her, she taught me a lot. She goes, we'd do better if we knew better. And maybe that's Maya Angelou. But, right? So there's a point when you have to take responsibility for your own actions moving forward. Otherwise, you're just going to be a victim and you want to suffer and you're going to sabotage yourself.
Well said. Well said indeed. forgiveness is not only for other people, which a lot of people think that you're forgiving someone. How could you forgive this and that they did? It's not about the circumstance that they had created, but it's really about putting a bow on that past experience and choosing consciously to step away from it, to step forward with all the power and all the knowledge that you do have now versus before. So you made a conscious choice of healing yourself and finding the answers from your inner self. And NLP was one of the methods that you stepped into for the first 3 years. What happened after?
Well, I became more spiritual and I started meditating and I started reading books. I read a number of books. I'll tell you a story about a book that came into my life. Being an abandoned child, interestingly enough, I always found older men that would be my father figure. Never anything sexual, but they were surrogate fathers. And I wasn't conscious of that at first. So I got this book that means the world to me. And I'm going to tell you how I got it. One of my surrogate fathers I met, he was from England, and he and I became fast and furious friends. So whenever he was over here visiting, we would always connect, always go out. We would just have fun. He had met my family. He knew everybody. We would exchange Christmas cards. Well, this one year, and his name was Terry, he sent me a book, and the book was Illusions, The Journey of a Reluctant Messiah by Richard Bach. It was around Christmas time. I was in the process of moving. The book ended up in a box. I get moved, and within less than 30 days, I heard from another surrogate father. His name was Tom, and I knew him from when I worked at a bank. And I hadn't heard from him in a few years, and he reached out to me. He goes, "How are things going?" And I said, "Wow." I said, "A lot's going on." And I had just started the counseling, doing the NLP. I had just broken up with a man, toxic relationship, and I had a 13-year-old niece that was living with me. And so I had gotten partially unpacked, not completely unpacked. And he goes, "Well, let's connect. Let's have dinner." So I was like, "Okay, I'll be coming from work. I'll meet you at this restaurant."
Yeah.
So anyway, he's seated at the table already. And as I'm walking up, he has the book that Terry sent me. And I'm covered with chills because now I'm getting this book from two of my surrogate fathers within less than 30 days.
Divinely guided.
There is something in this book.
Yes.
And I sat down and I'm like, wow. I said, I recognize the cover. It's very recognizable. There's a blue feather on it. And I said, I have that book. He goes, "Oh, what do you think?" And I said, "I haven't read it yet." I said, "I just got it at Christmas and I've moved." I said, I have it at home. It's in a box. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, "I guess that's why I'm here." And so that night when I got home, I ripped the box open that Terry sent me. It's the same book, but I wanted to read Terry's version first. Yeah. So that was like very insightful book. And it meant a lot to me because I got it from two of my surrogate fathers within less than 30 days. So
what was one of the message from this book that still to this day remains with you?
The bond that links your true family is not one of blood, but respect and joy in each other's lives. Rarely do members of one family grow up under the same roof. Notice there was no hesitation in delivering that either.
It's imprinted in you. It's imprinted. I love that.
Here's another one. There's no such thing as a mistake or no such thing as a problem. We seek out problems so we can have their gift. We just have to remember why we created them.
Which sounds very true for me. Oh my gosh. What a beautiful, divinely guided opportunity you got twice to really get in connection with the message of that book.
I have a version of it now. It's about two gentlemen that are going on an airplane ride. And throughout the book, there's messages like what I quoted. That's from the handbook. I have the handbook to this day and I read it. It's something that I read on occasion.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said two books. So this is the first one. What's the second one?
The Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu. And my favorite translation, because the translations are all different, is Stephen Mitchell.
Okay. Why that specific translation?
Because it's Chinese philosophy, and one of the basic premises is the yin-yang symbol, okay? Yeah. Part of it's white with essence of the black, part of it's black with essence of the white. Well, the circle is whole, in balance, it's complete, it's one. His is the only translation that I've read, and I've read probably 7 different ones, has masculine and feminine in their verses. They're translating them from their ideogram. So the translation doesn't give masculine or feminine. It it kind of alludes to masculine. So all the other translations always say the master and he. And Stephen Mitchell says the master in the feminine and says the master in the masculine in different verses. It's 82 verses.
Wow. So you started your healing journey. You came across these two books. You did a lot of different spiritual things, from meditation to really getting back to you. What was, would you say, the biggest pivotal moment where you're like, okay, now I have Allison back?
Wow. I would say my mother had passed. My sister that had tragically been in a car accident was still alive. And I started going to teacher's training for Kundalini yoga. That was very transformative. I think I was already awakened by participating in a lot of meditation and doing what's called a oneness blessing or Diksha. But this really, it was an 8-month process. They said you wouldn't come out the same, and they weren't kidding. And all of a sudden you start seeing things like veils almost being lifted. And I was actually mindful that, wow, the sky just looks bluer than it ever did before. Look how pretty green the grass is. I mean, colors were more vibrant to me. I was more connected with animals. Just a duck walking down the street. I was like, wasn't that beautiful? You know, there was that oneness, the connection with all living beings, really just appreciating nature and noticing the aliveness and the oneness between all of us.
The oneness between all of us.
And I'm going to include trees. I'm going to include minerals.
Yes.
I mean, the water, everything, the whole total environment in which we live, because it's all living and breathing. I mean, people don't think crystals have energy, and they're just like that's a rock. And no, it's not. They're alive.
They are alive. It is so true. Even water.
Oh, yes. I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Masaru Emoto.
Okay.
I met him a couple of times and attended a couple workshops at First Unity in St. Petersburg, Florida. So even though he has passed, I have some of his teachings, and I love like Down the Rabbit Hole, where they talk about some of his teachings because it matters.
Yeah.
It matters. And people, again, that goes back to what you had mentioned earlier about forgiveness, and it has a different vibration. And so staying angry and listening even to music that has a certain vibration can drain and bring you down, where others can bring you up and is uplifting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Music and the words and the lyrics of those music is so powerful. And this is something that a lot of people are not even aware of when they're singing a song that has a lot of anger into it or sadness into it. They're really evoking that emotion more.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it can serve to a degree. I mean, I did it. It did serve me to a degree because it made me feel less alone. At the same time, there needs to come a switch that had to turn on. It's like, okay, enough of it. We need to move forward to the next thing, what we want to embrace, because I don't want to live in this sadness forever.
Right. But here's what I will tell you. You don't want to stay stuck in a certain experience that you had. But you know what? By being complete, by being authentic, and by being whole means sometimes we are sad.
Yeah.
We can be angry with a situation, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stay there, because we're supposed to experience them all. But it's our choices to say, okay, that's how that happened, but I choose to deal with it this way, and I'm not going to react. I'm going to respond.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let it ruin my joy. You know, so we do have some roller coasters where we are exposed to experience all of them. That's what makes us authentic and real.
I 100% agree. And I always say, like, any emotion is just a signal from your body to tell you, like, this means something to you, or this, you need to step away. This is not safe. Like, whatever it is, it's always a signal for you to lean into and to be questioning and say, okay, why am I feeling sad? What is really truly going on in me?
Exactly.
But we don't ask these questions enough. We seek validation from other people. We seek validation from circumstances and things around us to really validate what's already in us. So, Allison, you've gone through such a beautiful transformation where you made conscious decisions all the time to not only step away or from a 6-year-old to deciding to creating these imaginary friends to a 16-year-old who told an adult man you're not man enough, you're hitting a woman, and this is not okay, to continuing to embrace your life in new ways, stepping out of a very abusive and volatile situation into shifting your life with various ways of healing. But what I'm also hearing is not only is it healing, it started as healing for yourself, but you embrace it in a way that you stepped into learning multitude of ways of helping others as well. So tell me more about that.
Well, here's a lot of things that people don't realize is that we have a big impact on people. There is a ripple effect. Like if you were to throw a stone in the water and you see the rippling, that's how we show up to people. I remember, and I've heard this multiple times, and quite honestly, I was kind of taken back the first time I heard it. I was living in Oregon, and I was living in downtown Eugene, and it's a college town, and there was a lady, it was an apartment complex, and a lady that was living across the hall from me, and her name was Ginny, and we're still dear friends. And she was more mature, probably old enough to be my mother, recently divorced, and her and I, became fast and furious friends. And we used to hang out, and we used to talk and what have you. And I remember this one day, she said, she used to call me Allie. And she goes, Allie, she goes, I don't know what would have happened to me if we had not met, because you saved my life. And I've heard that multiple times. And I remember I was like, me, I was really blown away that I had that impact on somebody. But we do. And the experiences that we have and the love that we can bring forth, there's one of the best and most loving things that you can do is listen to somebody sympathetically and let them process and don't even speak. And I guess I was letting her do that. And she was processing a lot of stuff. And then I'd let her just dump. And then I would say something and then she would dump. And so anyway, she's like, I was not in a really good place, but I'm in a good place now.
I'm sure there are many, many, many more who feel that way, who've been blessed to have you in their journey of healing, in their journey of experiences, as well as with the knowledge and experience that you hold. And also the testament that you are, because going through all of these hardships and choosing the path of healing on its own, it's a very big step. So many people don't find that path of healing. They get so stuck into not knowing what's really going on inside of them. So I feel so blessed to having this conversation with you today, and really you sharing what else is possible for other people so they can also live the overflow of life, the overflow of abundance, the overflow of everything that they're looking to create. So before we end this conversation today, I'm really curious, what is your view of overflow, of abundant living, and how do you approach that in your day-to-day life?
All right. Well, it's a subjective thing, first off. And I try to not, we live in sometimes what I would refer to as an ignorant, controlling society, that we're supposed to look a certain way and we're supposed to be a certain size. And so all these things, they want to put us in compartments.
Yeah.
And to me, what overflow is joy and happiness. That's first and foremost on my list.
Love it.
And if I come from a place of being joy and happiness and being authentic, I think it's really important to show up authentically. And sometimes people aren't going to like you, and that's okay. Because there were a lot of people when my sister was in a car accident that walked away from me. And it was hurtful at the time, but today I'm very grateful because I saw who they really were, and I would never be friends with them today. I'm not that person anymore. So just because something was in our history, that's not who we are. That was just something that happened to bring us to this time and space continuum, to provide us growth and healing. And I don't know, overflow is happiness and joy. And if you can be there, then everything else I think will come organically and naturally. As a result of that, I had always struggled because I didn't have the foundation of a father figure. A father figure is a foundation for you as a very young child, as a girl especially, because that's foundation. And for many years, I never felt safe, and I struggled, and I worked multiple jobs. Well, today I have a job. I make over 6 figures. I have a 401k, and I am overflowing in a number of areas in my life. And that's very good.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. If someone is inspired by your story and they would love to connect with you, find out more of these beautiful ways that you're serving the community in right now, how can they do that?
Well, they can reach out to me the best way, because I do work during the day. So the ideal way would be to send me an email. My personal email is sunshine, like the Sunshine State, Allie, ALLI 64 @yahoo.com.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for this beautiful, authentic conversation and for showing up vulnerable, because that's what you did. You really allowed every person inspired to listen to this episode today to hear the struggles, to find resonance and find that there is a way of healing. There is a way out. There is a way of bringing in the inner connection with themselves and feeling that, like yin yang, it's enough. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope this episode has helped you to feel less alone in finding tools towards a life which is overflowing with love and purpose. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to reach more individuals who are seeking healing and personal growth just like you. And don't forget to take a screenshot and share your aha moments on your Instagram stories and tag me, Matina. See you next week. Take care.